The explosion shook the observation dome. Glass-like panels trembled in their sockets, the overhead lights flickered, and a warning klaxon wailed through the sprawling corridors of the Interstellar Academy of Cross-Species Studies. Dozens of students, instructors, and autonomous aides scrambled for cover or bolted toward the emergency hatches. Except for one. In the middle of the chaos, a man lay on a reclining seat in the observation lounge, his legs crossed at the ankle, a half-empty foil packet of dehydrated mango slices resting against his chest. His arms were folded, his face relaxed, mouth slightly open. He was asleep. "Is he dead?" asked Trillick, a second-tier student from the icy moon of Dresth. He leaned over cautiously, his four ocular ridges narrowing in confusion. "No, I think he's in stage 2 sleep," murmured Velm, a tall, gelatinous life form whose translucent body fluctuated with ambient vibrations. "His heart rhythm is stable. Minimal distress." Another explosion rocked the station. A hull breach alarm activated, followed by a mechanical voice. "Deck 11 compromised. Resealing in progress. Evacuate to Zone 6. Jack Burton didn't stir. He scratched his nose lazily, turned to his left side, and mumbled something incoherent. Trillick looked around in disbelief. "He is sleeping through a structural emergency. Humans have peculiarities," Velm replied, trying to maintain composure as a nearby display blinked red with damage reports. "Though I admit, this is unusual even for them." The lounge lights stabilized. Emergency shutters began sealing off exposed corridors. A firefighting drone zipped overhead, spraying foam as it passed. Jack yawned. "Hey," said Trillick, stepping closer. "Hey, Earthman." Jack blinked, his eyes open slowly, looked around, then stretched his arms. "What's up?" he asked, as if waking from a nap in a quiet cabin. "The station was attacked," Velm said, his voice vibrating with disbelief. "You were asleep." Jack sat up, rubbed his eyes, then picked up the mango packet and popped another slice into his mouth. "Yeah, I know. I woke up for a second when the first blast went off. Sounded like a garbage chute backing up. Figured it'd sort itself out." Trillick stared at him. "You slept through a plasma blast that ruptured Deck 11. Jack shrugged and stood up, brushing crumbs off his shirt. "I can snooze anywhere. Learn that back in Fort Carson. You ever try sleeping next to a tank engine during drills?" After that, nothing really interrupts REM. Velm exchanged a look with Trillick that said, "Is he serious?" Jack walked to the viewport, watching the stars drift by as the station's emergency systems realigned its orbit. "So, who attacked?" "Unknown," said Velm. "But they were repelled before they breached the central core." Jack nodded. "Cool. Let me know if they come back. I'll grab a blanket." And with that, he ambled toward the corridor like it was just another Tuesday. Later that afternoon, the emergency debriefing convened in the main auditorium. Students of all species gathered, some still jittery, others attempting to process the morning's events. The head instructor, a firm spine being named Qualek, stood before the crowd, addressing them in steady tones. "We endured a coordinated assault by an unknown party. Thanks to rapid response protocols and our defense grid, the threat has passed. However, we must address a matter raised by several students. Namely, this." A central screen lit up with security footage. The lounge, shaking walls, flashing lights, and Jack Burton, sprawled in sleep, one leg dangling off the recliner. A low murmur rippled through the room. "Is this a display of negligence?" Qualek continued. "Or an extraordinary demonstration of human adaptability?" Jack, now seated in the third row, raised a hand lazily. "I vote for the second." Qualek eyed him. "Mr. Burton, you are aware this is a formal inquiry?" "I am. Also aware that I got the best nap I've had in weeks." Trillick stood from the back. "How can a species sleep in a crisis? That's not resilience. That's madness." Jack scratched the back of his head. "You ever tried worrying about everything all the time? It's exhausting. Sometimes you gotta shut down for a bit. Trust the people around you. Let the alarms do their thing." Velm raised a limb. "But you were alone in the lounge." Jack shrugged. Still had faith the station would hold. "It's built solid. You guys don't cut corners." Qualek tilted his head. "We will be conducting an evaluation to determine if this is repeatable behavior or an anomaly. In the meantime, you are assigned to the field resilience trials on Caldrus 4. You leave in the morning." Jack blinked. "Wait, isn't that the planet with the gravity storms?" Yes, Qualek replied. Let us see if you can snooze through that. The shuttle ride to Cauldres 4 was bumpy. Atmospheric shear made the descent feel like tumbling down a gravel hill in a tin can. Jack sat between Veln and a silent, armored instructor named Rusk. The rest of the transport was filled with students from different systems, all curious about the human who could nap through firestorms. Upon landing, the group was herded to a temporary shelter at the edge of a canyon. The wind howled like a jet engine, tugging at their gear. This place is insane, muttered Trillick, his thermal suit already frosting at the seams. Jack zipped up his jacket. Not worse than Utah in January. Veln blinked. You have this on Earth? Not exactly, but you get used to extremes. Humans have to. Our planet throws a lot at us: blizzards, sandstorms, earthquakes. We adapt. The trials began immediately. The first test was a simulated rockslide. Students had to find cover, coordinate with others, and preserve their own lives using minimal tools. Jack wedged himself under an outcropping, pulled his jacket over his face, and dozed off for 10 minutes until a boulder hit nearby and snapped him awake. Okay, that one was close, he admitted, crawling out. The next test involved a gravity surge field. The terrain would pulse with unpredictable G-force shifts, tossing or pinning participants. Most students struggled to stay upright. Jack, however, managed to curl up in a low-gravity pocket and drifted off for half an hour. When Veln found him, Jack was snoring lightly, floating 2 feet above the ground. This is not scientifically sound, Veln said, nudging him awake. Jack opened one eye. You ever nap in a hammock? This is just a space hammock. By the end of day 3, most students were exhausted, bruised, and sleep-deprived. Jack had a busted ankle from a misstep during a canyon rappel, which he took seriously. Medics immobilized it, ran scans, and confirmed a hairline fracture. Jack grimaced. Guess I'm benched for the last trial. You should rest, said Veln. Jack looked at the sky. I'll try. That night, a freak storm hit the camp: lightning, gale-force winds, and torrential rain. Tents were torn loose. Students scrambled to secure equipment. Alarms blared again. And in the center of the chaos, under a collapsed tarp and soaked to the bone, Jack was found asleep once more. It was Rusk who discovered him, shaking his head. This is not possible. Jack stirred, squinted up at the stormy sky, and said, could use a pillow, though. Back at the academy, Jack's performance was compiled into a report. The footage of him sleeping through the storm went viral across student forums. Some saw him as a living example of human indifference. Others, as a testament to calm under fire. Qualek summoned him. You have completed the trials. Your injury is healing within acceptable human timelines. But I must ask, is this truly instinctive behavior? Jack considered the question. No, it's learned. You live through enough tough nights, you learn to catch rest wherever you can. Sleep's not a luxury for us. It's survival. Qualek studied him. And you feel no shame in resting while others panic? I don't ignore danger. I just don't let it eat me alive. Qualek nodded slowly. An unusual kind of resilience. Perhaps worth studying further. Jack stood. Just don't ask me to nap in 0G again. That messed with my neck. He left the room limping slightly, but upright. Weeks later, during a station-wide emergency drill, sirens howled, artificial gravity fluctuated, and students were required to enact full evacuation protocols. Jack curled up in a corner of the cafeteria, used a backpack as a pillow, and shut his eyes. Veln approached, puzzled. You know this is a drill. Jack gave a thumbs up without opening his eyes. Exactly. Perfect time to catch a nap. Veln watched him for a moment, then turned to Trillick. Do you think it's contagious? If it spreads, Trillick said, we'll all fail our exams. Jack smiled faintly, drifting off again, even as a simulated explosion shook the deck. The infirmary lights were too bright. Jack squinted against the glare, one arm flung over his face as a gentle hum of machinery filled the room. Someone was poking at his ankle again. Still hurts when I flex it that way, he muttered, not moving his arm. You shouldn't be flexing it at all, a voice replied, clipped and slightly metallic. You were told to keep weight off for 3 planetary cycles. I wasn't flexing it on purpose. My leg twitched. You were trying to scratch your other foot with it. Jack pulled his arm away and looked down at the source of the voice. The medic assigned to him, a 3-limbed insectoid named Arca, adjusted a scanner over his foot with exaggerated patience. Her iridescent eyes blinked asynchronously. You humans are determined to sabotage your own healing, she said. I'm bored. I've been in this bed for 2 days. I keep dreaming about unfinished errands. I think my brain is staging a mutiny. Dreams are not diagnostic. They're when they involve my 6th grade math teacher chasing me with a traffic cone. Arca clicked her mandibles. Either disapproving or amused. Jack had learned that with her, it was often both. She pressed a cool gel pad to his ankle and checked the readout again. Bone tissue has started bridging, she said. But your inflammation markers are erratic. Have you been eating the nutrition packs? I traded them for real food. Velm brought me a bowl of something that looked like sea foam, but tasted like cinnamon toast. I think it was sap from his cousin. Arca stopped scanning. You ingested xelic resin? Should I not have? It is mildly psychoactive and a class 6 allergen. Jack stared at her. Then why did it taste like breakfast? Because your species has no reliable taste to toxic correlation. You eat things that glow. He shrugged. Not always on purpose. A faint buzzing sound came from outside the room. The medbay doors slid open and Veln entered, his form pulsing with faint green light that suggested mild concern. I brought broth, he said. Non-resin this time. I filtered it through a protein buffer. Jack sat up straighter. You spoil me. I'm attempting to prevent your immune system from dissolving. Arca stepped back, folding 2 of her limbs. You have 30 minutes. Then he scheduled for hydrotherapy. Jack accepted the dish and nodded. I'm ready for it. My back's gone stiff. I think I fused to the mattress. Veln extended a limb, cupping the bowl gently. Do you always make light of injury? Jack blew on the broth and took a sip. Only when I'm awake. Veln shifted his mass slightly. Some of the others think you're deflecting. They're not wrong, Jack said. But it's that or spiral. I've done the spiral. It's worse. I've observed spirals, Veln said. They do appear inefficient. Jack chuckled and took another sip. The warmth of the broth settled in his stomach like a small sun. What's the word outside? Everyone's still gossiping about my nap record? There's a betting pool now, Veln said. The current odds are 6 to 1 that you'll fall asleep during the next fire drill. Trillick tried to ban it, but it spread to the instructor ranks. Jack grinned. Tell them I'm not above performance napping. Veln seated himself on the edge of the bed platform, his form stabilizing. You know, not all species understand rest. Some of us operate on cyclic recharge. Others enter stasis. But your sleep this complete surrender, it unsettles some. Yeah, well, we don't really have a choice, Jack said. Our bodies break down if we don't. But I guess surrender's one way to describe it. You let go. Trust that the world won't eat you while you're unconscious. Trust, Veln repeated. That's the part we're still studying. The hydrotherapy chamber was on the lower level, past the diagnostic wing and beneath the gravity modulator array. Arca met them at the elevator. Try not to re-injure yourself during immersion, she said, leading the way. I promise nothing, Jack replied. Inside the chamber, the walls shimmered with a soft bioluminescence, casting moving patterns across the floor. The therapy pool looked deceptively shallow, but Jack had learned it adjusted depth based on the user's species and injury. He sank into the water slowly, careful not to jar his ankle. Temperature okay? Arca asked. Feels like a warm bath after a 10-mile hike, he said. Which I suppose is the point. Veln remained just outside the chamber, watching through the observation pane. Arca activated the current cycle. Gentle waves moved across Jack's body, massaging his joints and stimulating circulation. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. This might be the only thing that could make me forget I'm not allowed to run. You should not be running, Arca said, adjusting a control paddle. I know. But my brain's already planning a sprint the moment I can stand. Perhaps you should recalibrate your instincts. Jack opened one eye. We don't recalibrate. We compromise. Sometimes badly. Arca didn't respond, but she did lower the current intensity by a fraction. After 20 minutes, Jack was helped back to the drying platform, his leg wrapped in a moisture-wicking bandage. He dressed slowly, testing the weight with cautious steps. You'll need support for another week, Arca said, handing him a cane with a shock-absorbing tip. Jack twirled it once. Stylish. It is functional. Do not use it as a toy. I would never, he said, already pretending it was a fencing foil when she turned away. Back in the common hall, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Posters for the upcoming Interstellar Adaptability Conference had gone up, most still in languages Jack couldn't decipher. But the one in trade glyphs caught his eye. Panel highlight. Human behavioral response to crisis, instinct, or illusion? He groaned. I didn't sign up to be a symposium topic. Veln floated beside him. You're not on the panel. You're the case study. That's worse. On the contrary, you become a focal point. They're trying to understand how your kind processes chaos. I process it by taking a nap and hoping the world's still there when I wake up. Exactly. 2 days later, Jack was escorted reluctantly onto the stage of the main auditorium, not to speak, but to sit on a rotating platform while 3 scholars discussed his behavior like he was a rare insect pinned to cork. One of them, a cylindrical being with 12 lenses, said, "The human exhibited no flight reflex in the face of active threat." Fascinating. Another, a feathered academic with a translator unit, added, "He maintained unconsciousness during a zero-pressure drop. Is it possible his awareness threshold is simply defective?" Jack raised a hand. "I'm right here." The moderator, an old crustaceous diplomat named Prawn, gestured toward him. "We invited him for commentary." Jack leaned toward the mic. "I'd just like to clarify that I don't have a defective threshold. I have a well-practiced ability to filter out what I can't control. If the station's under attack, and there's nothing I can do in that moment, I rest. Makes me sharper when I do need to act." A murmur rippled through the audience. One of the scholars leaned in. "But surely fear must factor in. Biological panic." "Sure, we panic," Jack said. "But fear doesn't help if it paralyzes you. You learn to let it pass. Then you do what needs doing. That includes sleeping." A small, red-eared student near the front raised a hand. "What if the world ends while you're unconscious?" Jack tilted his head. "Then I guess I won't know, will I?" The room went very quiet. Prawn shifted his claws thoughtfully. "This is perhaps the most human answer I've ever heard." Later that evening, Jack limped back to his quarters, cane tapping gently against the floor. Velen waited outside the door, holding a data pad. "They've requested a follow-up scan of your brain during REM sleep." Jack sighed. "Are they hoping it glows?" "They're hoping for patterns. I'm not sure they're going to like what they find. Last time I dreamed I was making pancakes underwater while being chased by a goat in a business suit. We've already scheduled the observation chamber." Jack opened the door and flopped onto his bunk. "Fine. But if anyone wakes me up for questions, I'm biting someone. No one will interfere. The chamber is isolated." "Good," Jack said, already pulling a blanket over his shoulder. "Then maybe I'll finally get some peace." Velen hovered by the doorway a moment longer. "For what it's worth, I think you're teaching us something valuable. That naps are underrated? That adaptability comes in many forms, even unconscious ones." Jack gave a slow thumbs up, his eyes already closed. Outside the quarters, Velen dimmed his glow and moved silently down the corridor, wondering not for the first time how a species that could fall asleep in the middle of a firestorm ever made it to space. Jack's dreams were interrupted by the unmistakable sensation of someone observing him far too intently. He opened one eye. The sleep study chamber was completely silent, softly lit, and faintly warm. The cot beneath him was surprisingly comfortable, more than the narrow bunk in his quarters, but the real issue stood about a meter away, a creature the shape of a vertical ribbon with a dozen twitching antennae, holding a clipboard that seemed to hover slightly off the ground. "You're staring again," Jack said, his voice hoarse from sleep and mild irritation. The ribbon being, whose name he only vaguely remembered as something unpronounceable and mostly vowels, didn't look away. "You were muttering. In 3 different languages." "Yeah." Jack sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "I barely passed 2 of those in school. You were fluent. One of them was extinct until last year. I guess I've been watching too many documentaries." The observer blinked if the narrowing of a band of ridges counted as such, then turned to Velen, who was floating near the chamber's control panel. "Is this neurological scrambling? A symptom of cranial instability?" Jack swung his legs off the cot. "It's called dreaming. Sometimes our brains run simulations. Weird ones. Occasionally useful. Mostly just nonsense." Velen adjusted the scanner display, the light from the panel illuminating his translucent form. He entered REM cycles unusually fast. 3 separate times. There was no indication of distress. Only elevated cortical activity during the 2nd cycle. "That's when I was swimming in a pool full of spaghetti while reciting legal codes," Jack muttered. "Pretty sure that one's on me." "You were also smiling," Velen pointed out. Jack shrugged. "Must have been al dente." The ribbon being emitted a low, vibrating hum. "This is inefficient data collection. We expected trauma replay, not culinary hallucinations." "I've had enough trauma," Jack said, standing carefully and testing his still banded ankle. "No need to rewatch the greatest hits." "Then describe," the ribbon being said. "What informs your baseline calm?" Jack reached for the folded jacket he'd left on a nearby stool. You want a story? I'll give you one. But it's not going in a medical journal. Velen closed the chamber door behind them as they entered the observation lounge, now empty except for a cleaning drone that quietly polished the edges of the viewport. Jack sat near the center, propping his leg up on a low table, the ribbon being followed, hovering close enough to record. So, Jack said, stretching, I used to work on a remote maintenance rig in orbit around Jupiter's outer moons. Just me, 2 other guys, and a rotating crew of support drones. We were patching solar arrays that hadn't been serviced in 15 years. Velen sat beside him. That's a known high-risk assignment. Yeah, salaries were decent. Conditions, not so much. We had a week where the oxygen recycler kept misfiring. Alarms went off every 6 hours like clockwork. First few times, we panicked. Then we realized it was a faulty sensor module. The ribbon being recorded silently, antennae twitching. After the 3rd day, I stopped reacting. I'd just wake up, check the panel, reset the warning, and go back to bed. My bunkmate thought I'd lost it. But I told him, if I freak out every time a light blinks, I'll never sleep again. Velen tilted his head. You normalized the malfunction. I adapted. That's what we do. We find patterns. Even in chaos. The ribbon being interrupted. But you could have suffocated. Jack nodded. Sure. But if I'd stayed awake, panicking every time, I'd have made worse decisions. I figured if the air was really gone, I wouldn't be around to regret sleeping through it. There was a pause. Velen spoke first. You approach threat with resignation? With pragmatism, Jack replied. I assess. I act when needed. Otherwise, I rest. Because when the real crisis hits, I want a clear head. The ribbon being made a note, then finally floated back. We will file this under behavioral anomaly with contextual logic. I'll take that as a compliment. Later that cycle, Jack limped into the Academy's Arboretum, where students often gathered for quiet study or to recharge solar-based physiology. He found Trillick sitting stiffly on a bench near the artificial stream, his claws resting on a data tablet. The stream's water shimmered under the filtered sunlights, and the scent of sterile moss hung in the air. Trillick glanced up. You've become famous, he said without warmth. Jack sat across from him, the cane resting horizontally on his knees. So I've heard. Velen says someone made a comic strip. I saw it. You were sleeping on an asteroid while it exploded. Jack grinned faintly. Sounds accurate. Trillick set the tablet down. I still do not understand. You are fragile, easily injured, unshielded. Yet you remain calm in situations that would send most species into shutdown. You ever get caught in a thunderstorm as a child? Jack asked. Trillick tilted his head. No, I did. I was 7. Got stuck outside while the lightning hit a transformer pole 20 meters away. Sounded like the sky ripped open. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. My dad found me and just sat with me in the rain until I calmed down. He didn't say anything. Just made sure I was safe. Trillick blinked slowly. And that taught you to endure? Jack nodded. Taught me that panic doesn't fix anything. Presence does. Being steady, even when it's all falling apart. Trillick looked toward the stream. That is difficult. It is, Jack said. But it gets easier with practice. A long silence settled between them. Finally, Trillick picked up his tablet again. Your methods are unorthodox, but perhaps not foolish. Jack stood, adjusting his jacket. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Trillick didn't look up. It wasn't a compliment. As Jack turned to leave, Velen approached from the path, his glow subdued. The lecture committee has finalized the conference roster, Velen said. They've decided to add a demonstration segment. Jack raised an eyebrow. Of what? They're going to simulate a multi-system emergency. To observe species responses in real time. Jack stared at him. You want me to nap through a fake apocalypse? They want to see if your calm is transferable. If your presence alters the behavior of others during stress. Jack gave a short laugh. So I'm a therapy blanket now. Velen's form pulsed faintly. Not exactly. More like a stabilizing agent. The next day, the simulation chamber was prepared. Dozens of students filed in, each assigned a role: pilot, medic, engineer, civilian. Jack was given no script. Just a recliner. The lights dimmed. The scenario began. Warning sirens erupted. Simulated hull breaches triggered. Fire suppression systems activated. Students scattered, calling out protocols. The chaos was carefully choreographed, but still overwhelming. Jack lay back, closed his eyes, and true to form began to doze. Minutes passed. Then something curious happened. The shouting slowed. Movements became more measured. Students glanced at him, then at each other. Someone shielded a younger participant rather than bolting. A group formed a fire line instead of sprinting for the exit. Veln watched from the control booth, recording everything. When the simulation ended, the room was quiet. Jack sat up and stretched. Was that it? Prawn, observing from the rear, stepped forward. Fascinating. Your inaction reduced overall panic response by 30%. Jack stood and picked up his cane. Sometimes doing nothing is the most calming thing you can do. Prawn gave a slow nod. We underestimated the social feedback loop of perceived confidence. As the students filed out, some of them nodded toward Jack. A few even looked thoughtful. Back in his quarters, Jack eased down onto his bunk, his ankle almost healed. Veln entered quietly. You've shifted perceptions. Jack pulled a blanket up to his chest. Didn't do anything. Exactly, Veln said. And that may be your most human trait of all. Jack closed his eyes. Wake me when someone needs calm in a hurry. Veln dimmed the lights, then left in silence, the door hissing softly shut behind him. And for the first time in weeks, no one came to watch him sleep.